The most famous creative director in the fashion industry had been selling my designs as his own for years. He never created anything, and when I exposed him, he tried to destroy my career with his contacts. But he didn't know I kept every sketch, every email, and had 3 former employees ready to testify. There are industries where power is exercised without needing to justify itself. Fashion is one of them. Not because it is different from others in its human nature, because ambition and vanity and the abuse of power exist everywhere, but because it has a specific structure that facilitates them, a hierarchy where the names at the top shine so brightly that no one looks at what lies beneath that shine, where creativity is attributed to people who have the charisma to claim it regardless of who generated it, and where the youngest learn from the beginning that speaking has costs they may not be willing to pay. I learned that lesson, and then decided that the cost of not speaking was higher. My name is Valentina. I am 29 years old. I am a fashion designer specializing in haute couture design and experimental textiles. I graduated 5 years ago with the best academic record of my generation at a school that produces designers who end up at the most important houses in the world, and that distinction was what opened the door that later became the most important and most difficult experience of my career. The door was an internship at the fashion house of Edouard Marchand. Edouard Marchand is 53 years old, Belgian, and the kind of figure who in the fashion industry carries the weight of an institution. He has been on the cover of specialized magazines on 4 continents. He has dressed actresses at awards ceremonies that newspapers cover for weeks. He has the kind of reputation that is built over decades and that appears so solid that no one questions the foundations on which it is built. Those foundations, discovered in my first week of work, were not what everyone believed them to be. The internship lasted 8 months. The first 2 weeks, I was assigned to the pattern development department, which is where interns normally begin because it is technical, demanding, and produces measurable results. It was invisible and fundamental work, and I did it well, with the precision that was expected and with the speed that surprised the people supervising my work. At the end of the second week, the atelier director called me in her office and told me that Marchand had reviewed my patterns and wanted to see me. That meeting changed everything that followed. Marchand received me in his personal studio, which was a space designed with the careful intention of communicating genius. Work tables covered with materials, sketches on the walls, the visible energy of a place where creation happens. He showed me a design problem he had with the upcoming season's collection. A central piece that wasn't working, that wasn't finding its form, that was resisting the solutions they had tried. He asked me what I would do. I spent 2 hours working at that table while he watched. At the end of those 2 hours, I had 3 proposals, each with its constructive logic explained, with the specific materials each required, and with the way each one dialogued with the rest of the collection. Marchand looked at them for a long time. Then he chose one. He told me that would be the central piece of the collection, and he told me to stay. What followed over the remaining 6 months of the internship was the most intense experience of my professional training and also the most revealing in a sense that took me time to fully process. They turned me into what in the industry is called a ghost designer. The term exists even though no one uses it out loud, because naming it would mean admitting it exists. It is the person who generates the ideas, develops the concepts, produces the sketches and design solutions that then appear under someone else's name. I worked directly with Marchand for 6 months. I presented concepts to him. He approved them, modified them marginally, rejected them, or combined them with others. The final decisions were his in the sense that he chose between options I had generated. But the original creativity, the first sketch, the idea that later became the dress that appeared on the runway, with Marchand's name embroidered on the inside label, was mine in the vast majority of cases. I documented it without anyone asking me to, not because I had a plan from the beginning, but because I am an organized person and because in my training I had been taught that designers should maintain a record of their creative process as standard professional practice. Every sketch with its date, every email with its approval thread, every version of the design with its change history. It was simply my way of working. The internship ended. They did not offer me a contract. Marchand thanked me for the work with the efficiency of someone who knows that next season they will need another person like me, and that person exists because design schools produce young talent with the regularity of the seasons. I left with my folder of sketches, my archived emails, and the experience of having seen from the inside how one of the most admired houses in the world really works. For 2 years, I said nothing. Not because I was afraid, though there was something close to fear in the awareness that Marchand had the kind of power that can open and close doors in the industry with a phone call. But because I was building my own career, getting my own clients, developing my own design language, and in that process, what had happened during the internship was a weight I carried without knowing exactly what to do with it. What changed was an interview, a long cover interview, in the most important magazine in the sector, where Marchand described his creative process with the detail and passion of someone who genuinely believes what they are telling. He described the origin of specific pieces from the collection I had worked on. He described the moments of inspiration, the solutions to construction problems, the material decisions. I recognized every single thing he described, because I had lived them. From the other side of the table, I spent a week processing what to do. It was not a week of doubt about whether what had happened was what I remembered had happened. That I knew with the clarity of someone who has the original sketches with the dates and the emails with the approval threads. It was a week of thinking about the consequences, of being honest with myself about what I could lose and what I was willing to lose. At the end of that week, I called 2 people. The first was a former Atelier employee who had worked there for 4 years and who had left the company the previous year with a bitterness I had noticed but never asked about directly. I asked directly. She told me for 2 hours what she had seen over 4 years. Names of previous designers whose work had followed the same path as mine. A pattern that repeated with a consistency that made my individual experience part of a systematic scheme. She gave me the names of 2 other people who had gone through the same thing. I called them. Both confirmed similar stories. All 3 were willing to speak. I contacted a journalist specializing in the fashion industry who had spent years publishing investigations into the power structures in design houses. I knew her superficially from industry events. I sent her an email with a general description of what I had without giving specific details. She responded in 3 hours. We met 2 days later. I presented her with my complete documentation. The original sketches with their dates, the approval emails with their complete threads, showing the process from my initial proposal to the approved final version, the photographs of the finished pieces that appeared on Marchand's runway, compared with my original sketches, and the written statements from the 3 former employees who had lived similar experiences. The journalist reviewed everything in silence for 3 hours. When she looked up, she told me it was the most solid documentation she had seen in 10 years covering these kinds of stories. She asked me if I was ready for it to be published. I told her yes. The article came out on a Tuesday. It was long, detailed, with the documentation presented in a way that anyone with basic knowledge of the design process could understand the difference between what Marchand claimed was his creative process and what the documentation showed it had actually been. Reactions arrived within hours. In the industry, where many people had harbored similar suspicions but never had concrete evidence, the article opened a conversation that had clearly been waiting a long time for a reason to start. Other young designers contacted the journalist with their own stories. Academic institutions that had celebrated Marchand as a role model began reviewing their positions. And Marchand activated exactly what I had expected him to activate. His network of contacts in the industry to control the damage and where possible silence or discredit the voices that were speaking. The calls came. Agency directors who had expressed interest in my work suddenly didn't answer. An opportunity that was in the process of being negotiated fell through without explanation. Someone I considered a mentor called to tell me, with genuine sadness in her voice, that she hoped I understood the consequences of what I had done and that she hoped it was worth it. I responded to that call calmly. I told her I understood the consequences, that I had evaluated them before making the decision, that if the industry was closing doors because I had told the truth with verifiable documentation, those doors were probably not the ones I wanted to walk through. There was a silence. She wished me luck. What Marchand had not calculated was that the documentation I had was not only enough for a journalistic article. It was enough for a copyright infringement lawsuit. The attorney who took my case had spent 15 years in intellectual property with a specialization in fashion design. She told me that the metadata of my digital sketches, combined with the emails showing the approval process and the statements of the 3 witnesses, built an authorship case that was technically solid. We filed the civil lawsuit 3 weeks after the article was published. Marchand responded with his own attorneys and a countersuit for reputational damage that my attorneys described as standard delaying tactics in cases where the defending party does not have solid evidence in their favor. The process lasted 14 months. The result was a negotiated settlement that included a formal acknowledgement of my creative contribution to the specifically documented pieces, financial compensation calculated on the commercial value of those pieces, and a commitment of non-interference in my future professional development. It was not the public destruction of Marchand that some had expected, but it was the legal and documented acknowledgement of a truth that he had spent years building a fiction to conceal. 18 months have passed. Some doors that closed have not reopened. I accept them as the price of having told the truth in an industry that has its own rules about what is said and what is not. Other doors have opened. Doors that did not exist before, because the version of me that made that decision and lived with its consequences did not exist before. I have my own studio. Small, with the right resources, with the right clients. With my name on every piece that comes out of it. Only my name. That, which seems obvious and should not be an achievement, is what I value most from everything I built after that decision. My name on my work. Without intermediaries. Without anyone else taking credit for what I create. That is priceless, and no one can take it from me. If this story lit something in you, comment. Would you have spoken up knowing what you could lose? Like if you believe ghost designers deserve recognition. Subscribe for more real stories. Share with someone who works in a creative industry and needs to know their work has legal protection. Practical tip. If you are a creative in any discipline, date all your sketches and files from day one. Keep the emails where you present your work to supervisors or clients. Those records are authorship evidence that can be decisive if someone tries to appropriate your work. Your creative process documents your authorship better than any signature.